Are we live? We are. Welcome everybody to New Year, same challenges, what you need to know to keep your SDR team in the game. We are so excited you're here. If you can start us off by just dropping in the chat where you are tuning in from, we will then see where you're at. I want to make a quick introduction on Matt, the VP of SalesScreen. How are you this morning, Matt? How are things?
Doing really well, Tom. Doing great today, actually. Thanks. How are you?
Doing very well, doing well. Excited to jam on some gamification and talk a little bit here with you guys. James, so good to see you. You are the SDR manager over the EMEA side at SalesScreen, is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. Yep, based out of sunny Barcelona, Spain.
There you
as
go.
You can see some people in the chat for that as well.
Hey, yes, we got some Waterloo. We got New Jersey. A lot of people coming in. Nick from Chicago. Welcome, everyone. I am going to share my screen here and we'll pull up these slides. All right, can everybody see the screen? All right, got the chat here. All right, so we are going to kick off with the first part of this is we actually stirred up a little fun on LinkedIn over the last week. Many of you might have seen us kind of creating some banter around, you know, who has the hardest job in the sales revenue engine? Is it an SDR or an AE? And what you could see is a lot of people had a lot of passion on this topic. You know, Nate, who's inside sales, Bank of America said, you know, I'd advocate for the SDR role. We have to figure out the perfect level of depth of research and personalization to get that meeting. You've got Elliot Garcia, famous rev leaguer. He's out there working for Outplay, saying as well, right? SDR is that first interaction with the client. What I don't see is there's a lot of AE support in here. So Matt, talk to us a little bit about what your view is on this and where you feel, you know, that people haven't come to fight for the AEs a little bit.
Yeah, you know, you're not going to get a huge battle for me. I think there's a lot of appreciation for the SDR organization. From a salesperson's perspective, you know, there's a whole lot of value in the SDR team in general, even beyond just opportunity and pipeline development. You know, a lot of companies, they look at their SDR organization as the lifeblood. You know, they set the tone, they are part of the atmosphere, they're part of the culture. So I love the SDR organization in general and appreciate them. At the same time, I don't think you all have talked to my wife about the emotional roller coaster she lives on as my partner. You know, there's like a different level of chaos and emotions and crying and high-fiving that all goes on behind the scenes on an AE side of the house. So I think, you know, both really difficult and amazing and rewarding jobs in themselves.
I couldn't agree more. I don't know if it's apples to apples, right? There are a lot of parts of the revenue for both sides of the role. Obviously, I advocate for the SDRs myself because there is a lot more pressure. You know, there's a lot more to it. They are the first point of contact for a company. They are creating, you know, attention and promoting somebody to move to action just from a cold outreach. So, you know, my pick is obviously an SDR. What about you, James? Where you stand on this, or what are your thoughts on kind of what you saw happening over the week with people sharing their insights here?
Honestly, I love this poll. It was really great just kind of see all the different inputs. To me, though, you know, it's for the SDR team, it's kind of day in, day out. You're focusing on your output, your personalization. You're trying to find those yeses in a huge sea of no's sometimes. And it can be tough, but I think with AEs, it's a lot more about kind of being that jack of all trades. You're doing discovery, you're building that interest in the beginning, negotiating, closing, all that stuff, while also coordinating internally, externally with a lot of things. But I'm incredibly biased because I'm an SDR manager. So I just think SDRs have a way harder job, 100 times more.
You know, I think
I'm just kidding.
One of the points there, and you know, I think they're different. It's, you know, as Tom said, it's not apples to apples by any means.
Okay.
But I think one of the things, James, that you're talking about that's so important to recognize is SDRs have to get people excited in the first place.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult to get people excited about something if you're not excited yourself. And when you're in a sea of like more no's than yeses, it's really difficult to stay motivated and stay excited in the first place.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the hardest part, right? It's the motivational side. You know, it's hard. Burnout is a real thing for SDRs. You see it more often than not. And it's just because of those high pressures, the day in and day in rejection. So I couldn't be more excited as we open up this webinar for you all today to talk a little bit about what SalesScreen is doing and how, you know, bringing an element of gamification can really change the entire atmosphere of your virtual floor, your in office, and allow your reps to really have a lot of fun in what they do, versus just sitting there and dealing with rejection, you know, every single day. So that kicks us off where I want to talk with, you know, Matt a little bit. And, you know, this goes back to the vision, right, Matt, is what we want to do as sales leaders. Same with you, James, is we want to create a winning world-class sales atmosphere. That's our goals, right? James, that's what you're doing every single day with your team. Matt, that's what you're trying to do on the other side here. And we just want to make sure that they're in an environment that is buzzing, excited. Like you said, Matt, you want to love what you do, right? Because you are trying to get somebody to take action, get excited. And that all starts with you. You have to bring that emotion over the phone. Would you agree?
Completely. I mean, that's, you know, we make a living talking to sales leaders on a regular basis, and there isn't a sales leader that we talk to that doesn't have this vision. Every sales leader wants to create an atmosphere where their people are bought in. They love it. They're excited. They're motivated. They're high-fiving each other. They're getting pumped. They're pushing each other to do more. They're excelling together. They're accomplishing greater things than they did before. Like that is the belief. That's what every sales leader is looking for. And that is truly important. And motivation is the foundational component of that, for sure.
Got to be motivated. Got to be motivated to come in and have a great time. So let's talk about that, right? So we talk about it and creating this atmosphere. How, you know, talk a little bit about gamification and how that plays a part.
Yeah, so I think it's important to recognize that atmosphere that every sales leader wants to create, the core component of that is motivation. And what we've found is that gamification is the key to motivating people to do truly extraordinary things. And what I think is important for you all to think about as we set the stage for the rest of the discussion and give you more tips and tricks is that there are some core things to think about when we define gamification. And simply, gamification is the concept of adding game-like elements to non-gaming environments. But it's important for you to think broadly as you approach your own organizations. It's not simply just leaderboards and competitions. Those are elements of gamification, but it's truly an ecosystem that comes together to create the atmosphere. And that's where you'll excel. That's where you'll take our everyday principles, everyday things that we're a part of, like Starbucks reward points or Peloton personal records or Strava group achievement goals, you know, or even learning languages like Duolingo and up-leveling and having new badges that you attain when you complete certain levels and tasks. It's everywhere. Gamification is everywhere. And what we all need to start doing is recognizing that if we do it professionally, it'll drive everyone to be motivated to push themselves and do more and be more successful.
Yeah, gamification is huge. And it's crazy when you actually start looking around your life and looking at all the little things you do. We live off of rewards. People go to Starbucks, like you said, to just, you know, it's like 10 cups, you get a free one, right? Or free extra items in there to work towards just by doing what you do every day, which is go buy Starbucks. You know you're going to do it anyway. So why not link to the rewards and you know, gamify kind of what you're doing. James, do you see gamification pretty huge often in your everyday life or anything that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, outside of work, for me at least, I'm traveling tomorrow back to my home country of Scotland, and the first thing I did was I went to the person or the company that I have the rewards card for, the one that I'm going to get those flight points and I'm going to save them up and I'm going to get some free thing or some money off. And I mean, yeah, I think the whole idea of finding different ways, and you can do that. And I think one thing that's really important, Matt said, is professionally finding a way that you can really get this aspect of gamification and use that for not only, hey, get this 10th cup of coffee, but apply it more to your work, right?
And there's a reason why it works. And so, Tom, as we transition into the next slide there, that it's important for y'all to think about that there is a true chemical reason why applying gamification professionally works. And so if you break it down a little bit, dopamine, which most people have heard of, that's the brain's happy chemical, right? And that's released in anticipation of receiving awards. And it really pushes us and keeps us motivated to work hard. And oxytocin, another one to really, especially in a professional sense, think about, that's the trust and love hormone. And whether you're virtual or whether you're in an office, people working together to accomplish shared goals releases a love hormone and a trust hormone and creates a bond and camaraderie between people. It's really a chemical reaction that drives that. Endorphins, everybody loves endorphins. They boost our mood, they relieve stress. It's why everybody works out and pushes themselves to do a little bit more. It's what happens when you complete a project. When you work hard and push yourself to complete a project, these chemicals release and they change our mood and they relieve stress and they make us happier. And serotonin, I love this one, especially it's on a little bit more on the intrinsic side of motivation, which I truly appreciate. And that's when people feel proud and wanted and important after they've pushed themselves above and beyond and hit some milestone achievements and unlocked some badges or accumulated points or tokens or rewards along the way. So truly important for you to think about. Applying gamification has a lot of different types of use cases that we'll talk about and give you some examples and suggestions on, but it's not just leaderboards and competitions, and it's not just for the sake of having fun. It's to drive motivation, and there's a reason why it works.
Yes. Yeah. How crazy is that one little small tweak in your organization and on your sales floor can release 4 different emotions within your team, right? Or chemical balances to get them excited, get them driving. Between the dopamine, right? It's just a hit, right? People, I always love the interview question where they ask you, do you hate to lose or love to win, right? They always get you with that one. And it's like, oh, which way do you go, right? But people hate to lose. And they also love to win.
And it's,
So,
Tom, it's kind of it's an interesting concept. Like these things make us feel good. They make our brain feel good. And our brain is a feel-good junkie. Like we crave it. We want it, and it pushes us to do more and more and keep coming back to it because it releases things that make us want more of it. And if you all professionally, as leaders of your organizations, can figure out how to tap into that, not only will your people love what they're doing more and love being a part of your team, but they'll also push themselves to be more successful in the process.
Yeah, no, just like the serotonin, right? Like you mentioned, it's the milestones moving along the way, know they're working towards something. Because the hard part for an SDR is it's kind of a little bit of instant gratification, right? You booked a meeting, it's ready to go, you get that quick win, but then what, right? Then you got to kind of keep that dopamine going. Where an AE kind of works it over time. You don't get that instant gratification, not all the time. It takes 3 months to 12 months to get a deal in there. And so how do you stay motivated for most of that entire sales cycle and hit on these 4 elements? And I think that's where gamification comes in, right? Taking their mundane task, taking certain things that they can do to strengthen those emotions. Be sure to drop questions throughout this, by the way, in the chat. We'll address those at the end. If anything comes up, I know there's been a few that have been submitted. We'll be reserving those for the end as a quick reminder, but feel free to drop them in the chat as well as we go through. Anything you want to add here, James, on what you've seen in these 4 emotions, or which one you think really hits the head on the nail for you?
Yeah, I mean, I actually really liked your point about the whole idea of like that dopamine rush when you book a meeting. I remember actually when I booked one of my first meetings ever, I couldn't sit still for like an hour. I had to go walk around the place for ages, and the lights just came on in my in the place I'm staying at right now. But yeah, I mean, one thing as well is so important is if you're waiting for that dopamine rush of booking that meeting, getting that demo, whatever you really focus yourself on, right, is using all the other kind of brain chemicals, like getting that serotonin, making sure you're celebrating the achievements before that meeting that you're getting as an SDR, and making sure that you've got other things that are gonna, make that feel good junkie brain of yours, still going and still ticking and staying positive. So important.
I mean, booking that meeting, I don't know, maybe Matt has a different opinion on it, but I will tell you still, after being a decade in sales, when you know you can warm call somebody nowadays, right? You have your research, you're ready to go, and you can secure a yes so that they want to come to that meeting. I'll tell you, I'll jump through the whole sales floor, right? I'll run around for an hour too, right? Like you can't believe it, especially if you're in the enterprise space. It's pretty wild because you're landing, pretty big meetings with VPs of marketing, and you could go to your friends at the end of the day and say, you talk to the VP of marketing at, Petco, right? Or PetSmart. And you're like, that's crazy. They said yes to you to check out your service. What for an AE gets that hit for you, Matt? What's an AE's kind of rush of adrenaline or that junkie moment for them in comparison to, an SDR booking the meeting?
Well, there are a lot of different perspectives to think about in answering that question. For us on the AE side, it's often about process. And, the point is, yes, like we want to close deals and we want to make money and, we want to ring the bell when we close the deal. But a lot of times, especially as you sell into larger organizations, by the time you've gone through the 16 different meetings and tons of demos and evaluation plans and proposals and revisions and procurement and red lines and security and ISO certifications out your ears, by the time the actual contract gets signed, like you're over the deal. You've already moved on to the next. And so, what happens often on the sales side, the AE side of the house is like, I love the bell ringing for sure, but I really love the process celebrations and the milestones. And then also highlighting more than just that a deal closes. Like, is this deal that closed, does that put me or to put a rep to 75% of their goal or 125% of their goal, or like the bigger picture about the impact of that particular deal? That's where it starts to be even more important. And on the more transactional side, some of my friends that are in the more transactional selling space, it's like the concept of, this is my third deal this week, or this is the fourth deal in a day on even a more faster transactional deal cycle, like that kind of stuff. It's the story around it that has a bigger impact, and the process.
I would agree, right? From what I've seen, and I'm sure, James, you agree, right? AEs are more excited about just the process it took, the battle that it took, right? The battle of inches that got through the entire process, getting through procurement, RFPs, right? When you've secured an RFP, that's like the championship, right? That's the fun, right? You beat out other vendors, you had a great time, and you were able to secure that deal with your presentations and the way that you were able to organize, and how the team came together, right, to help you bring that over the finish line. It's crazy to see just the different sides of both sides of the coin, and what motivates each side, right? And how we as leaders can hit on each point. And so that brings us into the next slide here, right? Which is, wait, where are we going? I'm messing up over here. Here we go. All right, the pillars of motivation. These we're clicking all kinds of buttons over here.
Tough life being a moderator here, Tom, huh?
It's not easy. It's not easy. If everybody thinks it is, I challenge you to run a room, because it is quite fun. But let's talk about the pillars of motivation, right? So we've talked about the emotional response that the body gets, or the way we look at it. But I'd love for you guys to kick off, the pillars of motivation here. So James, why don't you talk a little bit about this with Matt?
Yeah, of course. I'll let Matt kick off, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. We may bounce around a little bit for sure here. I think that this is a little bit of a meaty slide, and it'll be a great lead into the recommendations and the tips we give you on the next couple in the next couple minutes here. But I think the concept to think about when it comes to gamification is there are a lot of levers, that there are pillars of motivation. And a way to think about it are there are different levels that levers that you can adjust. And the other thing that's crucially important for you all to think about as sales leaders is that not everybody's motivated the same way. It's not a one size fits all approach to your whole team or whole organization. Even when you have small teams, there could be multiple different personalities that are in there, and some people are more intrinsically motivated than they are extrinsically motivated. For those of you listening, there's actually an interesting section on our website, SalesScreen, and you go to the why gamification section, and there's actually a quiz you can take that identifies if you're intrinsically motivated or more extrinsically motivated, because it matters. And so for that, when we talk about the pillars of motivation, it's important to have a variety of ways to motivate people and encourage them to hit their peaks. And so, certainly leaderboards are the classic area. Everybody's got some version of leaderboard, whether it's just a Salesforce report or whether it's inside of a platform or in a spreadsheet or email. But they work. Some people are very motivated by being on top of the leaderboard, right? And you often probably know who that small group of people are before you even turn on the leaderboard in the first place, but they are important. It's important to have visibility there. Achievements are a really big thing when it comes to gamification, and it's important to celebrate everything. Maybe not always celebrating every single detail, but it's important to have a mixture of celebrating the end game, like an SDR creating that opportunity and actually getting that pipeline amount, and for an AE actually closing that deal. But there's so much more of our jobs that happen before that end result. And that's what we need to celebrate. And that's what we need to promote. And you can do that by recognition, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. And you can also do that by establishing progress points and milestones that you hit along the way. Competition is super important. It's a part of our everyday lives. Most sales people have some sort of competitive background in the first place, whether it's sports or debate teams or clubs that they're a part of, or siblings that they've just grown up as rivals with. There's competition everywhere. It's in our nature and DNA as a sales rep in some capacity. Coaching, crucially important inside of every organization. Most salespeople leave because they're not getting the type of coaching and professional development that they need and crave. And rewards, particularly important in the world of not everybody cares about the same stuff. Can't give out a Yeti backpack cooler to everybody. It doesn't matter, right? And those are things we'll talk about a little bit, but think of those as your levers. Those are the areas that you can start to move, change, emphasize, adjust, pivot at any point.
I couldn't agree more. These are what I've seen within Rev League, what I've seen in my years running some teams. Gamification has been that movement to get them over the hump, and it comes down to really these 5 things. If you're going to do any gamification within your org after this webinar today, make sure it covers these 5 points. James, where do you feel from an SDR side, what's the most important one for you that you see impact your team?
For me, at least, there's kind of a mix. As a manager, you have to really realize that every single person's motivated in so many different ways. We're talking about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is a huge aspect to this, but everyone is different. And for me, at least, when I was an SDR previously, and one thing I actually love now is the idea of achievements. The fact that you can actually say you called the most anyone has ever called on a day. And the last time that this was done was this long ago. And a lot of people, when I talk to them, they don't really know when the last, what the highest call number is or how the most amount of meetings that are booked in the day. But that's such a huge part of celebrating something, which is, you're breaking a record. It's depending on how long your company's been around, it's a huge moment. And I think really just finding ways that you can say, hey, you do realize that you've just made 100 calls in a day or a week or a month or a year, or all these different things, and just making sure that it's celebrated when these things aren't usually happening. As a rep, it's great because you do that little extra push so you can make that 100th call, or if you're a manager, it's great because you can find ways and actually celebrate, which is what every manager wants. I'm sure it's a huge part of what RevLeague is as well.
100%. The achievements have been game changer, right? We've got it set up for even a hat trick in the day, right? I don't know about y'all, but
About the
booking
same.
3 meetings in a day is
Yep.
like that's our, game-winning shot at the end of the day when you can hit that hat trick. And for those in the audience, a hat trick is similar to the sports world. It's a 3. They've done three goals in a game. It's in 3s. And so, it's a hat trick for an SDR to book 3 meetings in a day, or for an AE, right? Like you mentioned earlier, Matt, like imagine an AE closing 3 big deals in the same day. Okay, you got the first one, but now it just keeps going and you're like, holy smokes, like contracts are coming in and you hit that hat trick, and to celebrate an achievement like that is huge, right? And I love how we touch on this slide and the little tweaks we make, but celebrate the big stuff and the small stuff,
Yep.
right? That's the crucial part too, is it's not just about the big things that happen of closing a deal or booking a meeting, but like you said, James, is looking at the small stuff, right? Those milestones, maybe you did 500 dials in a week and that was the most ever, right? You out dialed everybody on the team, or you cleaned up the most tasks, right? I used to use gamification as a leader, and tell me if you guys have done this, is like getting some of those pain points on the team, right? Where you don't get them putting in notes. Okay, I'm gonna take some shots here at some AEs because they don't put in notes in their CRM. What's on that? I'm just saying, we would make a gamification, right?
The famous update your pipeline. I don't know how many times Matt said that in his career. Yep.
All right, Matt's gonna come back at us, but I would gamify that, right? If you have AEs that are struggling to take on some of these smaller stuff tasks, gamify it. Get them in the practice and motivate them to want to put in the notes, right? Hey, if you could put in 10 notes this week on 10 accounts, $5 to Starbucks, I'll get you a coffee on Monday, or, come in late, go enjoy some time with your family or your friends. And then you'll start to see over a few weeks, you can let off the gas and now they're just regularly putting in notes. So it's about celebrating that small stuff. Would you agree there, Matt? Do you see that with AEs? Do you kind of gamify them to clean up their pipeline?
Oh my, you are speaking my language, Tom. This is it. I mean, from an AE leader perspective, we often refer to it as the adoption use case of gamification.
Yeah.
You shine a spotlight. Gamification, think of a gamification like a spotlight. You can shine it on whatever initiative, whatever priority, whatever metric, whatever scenario you're dealing with that you want to improve inside of your organization. And the data entry component, one quick example for you. I mean, it's like the AEs have a mental block against filling out forms. Like it wouldn't happen. Like, but I can't imagine myself owning the house that I'm in if my wife wasn't here to help me take care of the process. Like I mentally, I can't figure out how to handle that kind of stuff. And thankfully, I am married.
To gamify you.
But a quick example for you all to think about when it comes to data entry inside of Salesforce, think in terms of MEDDIC completion, right? That's a common sales methodology or qualification that people go through. What we had to do internally here is create a MEDDIC score percentage. So we've got fields inside of Salesforce, and you've got to fill it out. And then you've got to, what percentage of the MEDDIC fields are completed, right? And it ranges based on how many fields you filled out. So think of then creating a gamification roadmap for that, where if you get this inside of your organization, you can apply the roadmap to anything that you need to get accomplished. So the first thing is raise awareness. And so that you simply just activate it where everybody can now see what is their average MEDDIC completion score across all their open opportunities, right? Like just raise awareness and then show everybody's completion percentage against each other. So it's like out in the open, because a lot of times AEs just don't understand the impact of not entering the data. And so
Right.
raise awareness of it, then start celebrating it. If anybody gets 100% completion, meta completion on an opportunity, that could be an announcement that gets made, or a post, or a Slack message, or something in a celebration feed. Hint if you're using SalesScreen. But then you start to gamify. You can add competitions so that whoever's got the highest meta completion percentage over the course of a month or over the course of a quarter, they win. You can unlock badges and things like that. But the point is, let's start to track it. Let's raise awareness around it. Let's start to compete on it. Let's coach on it. So bring it into your one-on-one coaching sessions. What is your average meta completion score? Why don't you have the data? What questions are you not asking in discovery that are preventing you from having the data? Or are you just being lazy and not entering it in the first place? Like, that's another scenario.
Well, that's where the coaching and the rewards come in, right? Go ahead, James.
I was about to say, it's the whole carrot and the stick, right? Much rather get a carrot than a stick. And one thing, kind of taking it back to SDRs now, is I think SDR managers, if they ever look at any kind of sales productivity tool you have, we use Outreach here, and the amount of overdue tasks that you see, for everyone when, people get further down the sequence, and, trying to raise awareness of that and make sure that people are aware of it, put a leaderboard. It's the first thing I did, I think, on SalesScreen when I became a manager here. So yeah, it's super important and great use case.
Yeah, you can set up a contest, right? Clear out your task bin by Friday, right? And every task completed, log it in SalesScreen, and whoever could get the most tasks completed and get themselves down to that reset, right? That zero inbox, right? Get a reward, right? And you motivate that. And so you're able to drive a lot of that. So I love this. I think that I've done in the years that I've built gamification, these are by far my 5 pillars, right? You got to have the leaderboards. That's probably the most part. Is if you're going to do a contest, make sure people can see and track and know where their progress is. That's where a lot of people will mess up or drop the ball. You do got to create some type of dashboard or leaderboard. Obviously, SalesScreen has the most beautiful interface I've ever seen. I enjoy it, and it really keeps it organized. But people know exactly where they are, right? And know what they need to do to hit that next milestone, that next achievement. But the leaderboard is going to be the most important part. And then the rewards. Don't let it be so blanket, right? Like you said, Matt, not everybody works off money. Okay. There's people out there. I don't know who you are and how weird you are, but people don't like money. They want other stuff, right? They want experiences. They want cool trips. They want, other things. So having that rewards, and I would tell you that's been game changer on the RevLeak side. We now have a ton of rewards on the back end. We've put up a few different things. And people love it. They redeem it. They feel all excited. It's like, oh, I earned something. I got something. And then you're leveling up, right, with those achievements. So, if any questions on this slide, drop them in the chat for us. We will be sure to touch on them again at the end. Real quick question in the middle here, Matt and James, is the interface in SalesScreen able to be in Spanish? Is that something that can be done?
Yeah, we have a native translation into 7 languages at this point. Okay. Spanish is absolutely one of them.
Great. Awesome.
Yep.
All right. So let's jump into, SDR best practices. James, this is your moment to shine, my friend. This is our little time to chat here on what have you found on the SDR side of this, the best practices when it comes to gamification.
Yeah, this is great. I really like the first one of a kind of clear path to success. Now, success for different people means many different things depending on where you are as an SDR. But when you first start doing your onboarding, the whole point is making sure that you're as ramped up as possible doing your onboarding. When you are kind of at the beginning stage of actually reaching out to people, it's all about, you know what good looks like, but getting there is something that's really a challenge for a lot of different people, and finding ways to make that an easier process, whether it's actually we're talking about this in RevGenius today about kind of thinking back when you've got the main goal of your target and working that backwards, finding different ways you can motivate and engage these people as they're doing that, and making sure that when someone is kind of at that point where they're looking at other options and past the SDR role, making sure they have a clear path to that as well, making sure that they have a pathway to not only just being an account executive, which is not the only place you can go. A lot of people move to SDR management like myself, product, marketing, lots of different places you can go. And there's so many transferable skills as an SDR. And just making sure that everyone's kind of supported, knows what that path is to get there, and that you have a path wherever you are in your journey as an SDR. Super important.
Yeah, I think, James, it's such the clear path to success concept, I think is so important for SDR organizations and for every organization to appreciate. You know, we live in a world where people want to improve. People are taking self-help courses. People are challenging themselves to do more. I mean, everybody wants to improve themselves. And so as an organization, it's really important to lay out the framework of how where somebody begins doesn't have to be where they end. And what do they do to get to that level? A lot of times we see people refer to it as just simply KPI awareness and path to elevation awareness. And we often look at it as if you can make the data visible in a way that an SDR understands what they're doing, are they on the right track? How do they compare to their peers? And what else do they need to do in order to level up? That for us, or that for sales leaders, is the equivalent of allowing or enabling your SDRs to have a relationship with their data. And that's empowering. That all by itself, without managers having to do anything else, that alone will guide and motivate an SDR to do really incredible things.
I always say, sales is a science, right? You always get into that other battle, right? It's sales, science, or an art, right? And for me, I just do believe it all starts with the science, because without the science, you can't bring in the art and the creativity of being able to pull those levers and do things within the AE cycle or the SDR cycle, right? You have to be in love with your data. As a leader, please empower your reps to know their story, know where they're going. Like you said, James, an SDR should absolutely know if they outperform their own self, right? We're all trying to be 1% better every day. And so if I did an extra 10 dials more this week than I did last week, like huge, cool. That means I'm growing, I'm getting better, my processes are getting faster, and I'm getting able to do more. Or maybe I burned too many accounts, right? I got to slow down. But you get the idea, right? It gives you the data to know which side of the coin you're on. And then again, bringing in that recognition. SDRs, they need it. I'm not going to lie, in the time that I've been in that land and learning from it, they need their biggest cheerleaders, because at the end of the day, they are getting berated all day long. I don't know about y'all, but getting hit with negative rejection every single day will eventually take a toll on the mind. I don't care how strong or thick-skinned you are, over time, that will wear on you, right? Even Matt, probably, right? James, you guys went through it. Like, imagine your SDR leaders or your AE leaders were never around, and for 30 days, you just had to be on your own, right? And didn't talk to anybody. Imagine how that rejection would play after 30 days, right? You might be frustrated, but if in that 30 days you had somebody kind of behind you, pushing you, I always look at it like in football. We used to have to run the field up and down, and it was always about making sure the last man got across. So when we all finished, we would go back out to the middle of the field and help the last guy all push them over, right? And support them getting across that finish line. And so when you're recognizing and that's the part I think in all of this is being a lot more cheerleaders than what most SDR leaders or leaders are, is recognizing and supporting your reps.
Yeah. And sorry, Matt, you're about to say something. I cut you off.
It's okay. Go ahead, James.
No, I was just saying, one thing that's so important as well, and a lot of sales leaders that I was previously talking to as an SDR, was the fact that everyone's remote now. Like a lot of people are maybe moving back into the office, but it's such a challenge to kind of have that feeling of being together when you're apart. A lot of companies have adapted, but there's still that kind of aspect. Instead of, you don't always see people face to face every single day, and someone feeling a bit deflated and down when they're they've got the 20th, do never call me again, please do never call me again. It's the whole idea of just making sure that everyone's feeling a little bit closer, even if they are miles and miles away from each other.
And that was a great question, and we're going to touch on that here shortly. Is Nick Sproul, one of our fearless leaders we all know, asked that, right? Is how are people engaging their remote SDR teams? And so we'll save that here for a few minutes, and we'll come back to that, James, and touch on that, because that's where this is, the big game changer.
Yeah, it's super important.
Go ahead.
Oh, it's super important
Go
there.
ahead.
A couple last things for you to think about when it comes to recognition. I think it's a mentality that what we've seen and what we've heard from a lot of sales leaders that is important for the rest of you listening to this to think about is that as everybody is hybrid or completely working from home, you need to think about the recognition more than you would traditionally. Because in a regular in-office setting, an SDR can turn to their SDR peer next to them when they landed that meeting and high-five them directly. And that could be enough, but they don't have that right now. It's not there. And you've got to find more ways to bring recognition and celebration to the people that are on the front lines and emotional and dealing with it and are often isolated. So it's super important to think about that. Also really important to think about in that regard, the level of recognition that they get. SDRs often in many organizations don't realize how important their role is to the success of the organization. And an SDR needs to know, like, they have an impact. Like, whether you're a small company, medium-sized company, enterprise company, this is all true in all of them, but particularly true on the smaller, more high growth related companies. Like, every meeting you book matters, right? Every new opportunity that gets created matters. There's real revenue associated with that. And so if there's a way for SDR leaders, AE leaders, CROs, anybody, if there's a way to make it easy for the executive team to apply some recognition to the SDR organization, it goes a long way. So think beyond just the main cheerleader, which is the SDR team lead or the SDR manager. Think a little bit beyond that and try to get some sort of executive, some CRO, some SVP to acknowledge the performance of SDRs, because that not only does it just go a long way, it releases chemicals, in the SDR's brain, makes them happy, makes them more motivated, but it also raises awareness to the organization about the contribution the SDR team is making.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot from an AE perspective as well, right? Recognizing your AEs, letting them know, celebrating with them. I mean, most AEs have been remote far longer than most SDRs, right? Most orgs I knew, SDRs were always in-house and AEs were remote, right? They were traveling, doing a lot. So this is even far more important for those peeps because they are alone. They're not getting to ever high five, right? They never really have that. They're on their own. And so it's your job as a leader. I'm sure, Matt, you are probably the biggest cheerleader these peeps have, is constantly letting them know, I'm in your corner. I am here. Let's gamify some stuff. Let's have some fun. Who can bring in the first 50K deal, right, of the month? Go out there and get a big deal, right? And then you're encouraging them to drive and trying to just show them love, throughout the days, because their cycle is even longer, right? Me and James and some SDR leaders in here, it's a little quicker, right? An SDR is probably going to win on a daily, maybe 3 days on a bad end, right, James? They might go 2-3 days with some zeros and kind of be in the dumps. But like an AE, I mean, they're going a couple weeks, they're going a couple months, maybe without any wins. They're doing great demos and Matt's calling them up like, hey, update that pipeline. Where are we at? And they're like, we're still here. I don't know what's happening. We're still here. I got a couple deals. We're making it happen. But it could be a while. So it's so imperative to make sure that they feel supported.
Sure. It's so true.
So we'll get over here to really,
Tom,
what are some tips?
Sorry, Tom, let's jump back just one sec. Another thing for you to think about, for the rest of the group to think about, we should talk just a little bit extra and give some advice on the reward side of things. I think we've talked about competitions a little bit. Always happy to have more brainstorms around competitions. It's important to give everybody a chance. That's the concept of the right kind of competition. Don't stack everything so that the top performers consistently. Right. And so happy to brainstorm, offline for anybody in the group about competitions, because there's a lot of different ways to approach it. But rewards are really, really important for you to think about. And we talked a little bit about the concept of not everybody cares about the same thing, right? That, not everybody wants the Yeti cooler. Not everybody wants the, Sonos speaker or $100 gift card or things like that. We've seen a huge rise in the types of rewards in our reward shop across our customers that are non-monetary. And and it's really it's an interesting approach because a lot of salespeople often think like, or you think of salespeople as very money driven and that's the only thing that they care about. But what we've really seen over the last year is a huge uptick in companies leveraging coaching sessions with an executive, or like a lunch with a CEO or a lunch with a CRO, or something that's like relationship related with an executive that maybe they would have seen passing in a hallway or like grabbed coffee in the office together or something like that. But while everybody's hybrid or work from home, it's not happening as much. And so these free kinds of gifts, or like an extra day off, or you have a few hour, like an extra hour, a delayed, a delayed start, or an early dismissal kind of concept is popping up. Charity related rewards. Again, not everybody cares about the money, and it's wrong for sales leaders to think that. And so, we're seeing some prizes like team-based competitions. The winner of the competition can pick the next charity that the company works toward. We've even seen people do a lot of competitions that are around physical activity to try to get the employees outside and moving around and active and releasing endorphins, which reduce stress, right? It's a chemical that happens.
But you could do team outings, right? Do a big quarter goal or a big monthly goal. That's what I would do, is if they could all hit over 120% in the quarter, they would earn a huge party, right? And I would save the budget and say, listen, we could either do small things along the way or one big thing. What do you all want to do? And they would say one big thing, right? So, okay, whole team hits over 120% equal, every single person, we could do a huge outing, right? That would be a reward. And they love that stuff, right? And then it helped bring in collaboration because they wanted to help each other. If everybody was there but 3 people, they were like, no, how do we help? Like, how do we get you over, right? And so you kind of bring that camaraderie and that support to that rewards part too. Because it's not individuals, right? Don't just look at it from an individual comp or things. Try to bring people together. Another comp you could do is like find strengths and weaknesses of people. So like somebody's a really good cold caller, but somebody's not a really good emailer. You combine them, right? And you do comps. Yeah, James, right? And you do comps and AEs. Yep, an AE is really good at discovery, but an AE can't close. Compare them, right? Get them together. Do some comps to where they support each other on a common goal. But we do got to kind of wrap up. So great points there, Matt, James. Again, all 3 of us are available. I shared our LinkedIn's in the chat. Happy to jam on this stuff, give you guys some creative ideas. But talk to me a little bit about, James, some SDR tips and tricks, right? How do we make this all come together and put a bow on it? And what are some things, that you have here?
Yeah, of course. So this is more for the SDRs out here more than the SDR managers, but I think these are so important. I think the landscape for what sales is and SDRing is changing. What feels like day by day with every single new thing coming out is what is kind of the norm. I heard about cold FaceTimes, which we could probably go into at some point. Not sure how I feel about them, but I've heard that some people got a lot of success.
Hey, they work. They work.
But yeah, I mean, make it personal, right? It's about the idea that the amount of people that are sending, VPs, executives, messages on a daily basis, I bet Matt's inbox is jammed full of lots of different kind of outreach and all this stuff. And I think you got to find ways to kind of differentiate yourself when doing that, finding ways to stand out in that crowd of maybe trying some sort of video message, making sure that it's got a personal feel to it and that you are, personalizing every single one of your like at least first couple of touch points. Voice messaging on LinkedIn is a huge aspect. I think the fact that when people have been working from home for so long, you've got this aspect of so many people, they're used to the idea of Zoom calls and all that stuff. They want to see a face when talking to people. They want to hear someone's voice. And I think that sometimes text can be really flat. You don't really get the idea of kind of emotion as much from, a video, voice messaging. If anyone is ever going to reach out to me, by the way, please at least include a video at some point, or I might not actually read it. But yeah, for sure, I think it's really important being personal, making sure that you're tying in the personalization aspect to what you do and make sure that there's a synergy there. There's no reason to reach out, right? And yeah, I mean, I could go on about this for all day. But really, I think it's really important to make it personal and change up what you're doing and kind of break through that noise while also adding value and showing the other person on the other side that, hey, I'm a human. This is me doing this, super, super important.
I agree. I think making it personal is huge. And it's not always about, what favorite school you went to, your college. It's about relevancy, right? Coming in with the right message, making it personal to James or Matt. Like, I picked up the phone or I wrote this email with intention, right? There's a real reason I'm reaching out. If you're just going through the motions, you're doing it wrong, right? Really go after people that you mean to speak with, and make it personal. And then I love your part about staying in touch, right? Like, make sure you're hitting all the channels, the multi-channel hustle, like I like to call it, right? That's where you can book 3 in a day. Everybody's like, how do you get hat tricks like every single day? And it's like, well, if you maximize your channels, you're getting 1 meeting from cold call, you're getting 1 from email, you're getting 1 from social, all in the day, right? Right. So that's where the multi-channel, because they're like, how do you get 1 a day? And it's like, well, that's just 1 channel, right? That's producing that. Then if you're hitting all of them, and then get them competing, have some fun. Do battle of the phones. Weekly call business are always super beneficial. There's a lot we could do here, as we've all talked about today. In the last 10 minutes here, what we're going to do is talk a little bit about some Q&A, right? Let's wrap up here, and just talk about some of the questions that have come up for all 3 of us. The first one we kind of touched on, right, was from Nick. How are people engaging with their remote SDR teams? So Matt, James, if you could spend like a minute each on what you've been doing, right? Because I know you guys both have your orgs completely spread out. What have you been doing to really, one tidbit you could give that's helped you engage with your remote teams?
Yeah, great question. Our SDR team setup is actually almost fully remote. We've got SDR based out of Barcelona, people in Norway and in Sweden. So we've got people all over the place. So this is actually a really good question. I think the most important part is trying to make interactions a lot more intentional, where you're kind of making sure that people are meeting up. And one thing we started doing a lot more is kind of making sure that people are communicating a lot more together. And those kind of times where you're both sitting together isn't necessarily the same thing when people are remote right now, and making sure that people aren't left behind and I've got people to talk to and jam with and say, God, someone didn't pick up when I really want to talk to them, and just vent about life and work and all that stuff that you kind of miss in that physical world.
Absolutely. What about you, Matt?
Super important, James, and a couple other things for you all as sales leaders to think about. One of them is check in to see if they have a buddy. Like, it's a good spot check for you to think about. If you've got an SDR team that's working remote, or even an AE team that's working remote, like if they're totally remote and they don't have like their bestie, kind of, their work bestie, somebody that they're jamming with and having some banter with, like, it's important for you to pay attention to that and see if you can work on that. You need to keep people connected, and they need somebody to lean on. The other thing for you to think about is recognize beyond the team, right? It's easy to get stuck in comfortable as a leader of a team to just talk to your team and celebrate things within your team. But as everybody's remote, that keeps them isolated from the rest of the group. And you've got to figure out how to push beyond that and get recognition from the organization to let SDRs know they're part of something bigger than just the team that they're on right there.
Quick tip is, if you're on Slack or any chat communication, open a lobby that the whole org is in, right? Like, let everybody be in there, jamming out, chatting, and kind of provide an environment where the whole org can get together, right? And talk or share, or who's down, I'm available for lunch for the next hour. Who wants to jump on a Zoom? And you get your whole org talking, right? And having some fun. Big game changer in a remote world. That would be my one tip, is don't silo. Like you said, Matt, like, open up a whole chat between the SDRs and the AEs. I would hope SalesScreen has theirs, right? And you guys are all in there together, but
we've got the water cooler chat. Yep.
Yeah, get the gauntlet open, right? Call it the gauntlet and put everybody in there and let them have some fun, banter, share their wins together, but don't make an SDR group and an AE group. That's where it breaks, right? Don't do that. Just put them in one, let them all work together, and then kind of silo from there in smaller groups, right? Couple more questions. Matt, James, what's the minimal team size that can benefit from gamification?
So, I mean, anybody can benefit from gamification. An individual person can benefit from gamification because they can compete against themselves to push themselves further. So, you know, there's no real minimum size there that we see. But I do, however, see a bigger value once you start getting into bigger teams. You know, so again, there really isn't a minimum.
10 or more.
Yeah.
You think 10 or more? 10 or more is when it gets like super pumped, right? Like you've got something to work with. But I think, like you said, right, one person can do gamification. I do it on a day-to-day basis, right? You set your goals and you do what you need to do for you. But I think, you know, 2 or more helps. Have somebody to compete with that kind of pushes you.
Yeah, you know, keeping in mind that there are different elements of motivation and different elements of gamification that are part of that. And sometimes, you know, I say it could be a team of one, and that really can, because there are a lot of people that are intrinsically motivated or may compete against other industry benchmarks or standards or previous records at the organization they're with. But the reality is 10 is kind of a starting point for like team camaraderie. You know, 20 is, that's usually most of our client base starts around 20 or so and goes up from there, because you see a bit more of like the flurry of engagement and interaction. The buzz gets a little bit more when you have that many people at a minimum, because, you know, if the smaller the team, if you only have 2 or 3 people on your team, like the banter and the one-on-one battles only go so far when you do the same thing over and over again.
Totally. All right, and our last question here. Are the competitions based on what the SDRs are motivated by, or more what the managers and leaders are trying to improve on with the team? So would you say in the gamification elements that it is based on you driving the team, or you as a manager dictating those?
Yeah, so
the
key to think about there is in going back to the original definition of gamification, where you're gamifying everyday elements of our lives. You're adding game-like principles into that. The other key differentiator between games and gamification is that gamification is designed. Games are simply happy. They make you feel good. They push you to do things. Gamification is applying it to real business outcomes. And so when you think about competitions, you do need to have a mix of things that drive business outcomes from a manager perspective, but also make SDRs have some fun along the way. And so key things to think about are mix it up. Don't run the same thing over and over, ever. Like that is not going to work. Do a combination of things that are designed for top performers and teams at the same time. So simultaneous competitions around the same activities, but you've got a chance for individuals to win, and you also have a chance for teams to win, where as much as possible combine roles. So create like custom teams where you have AEs and SDRs working together against other AEs and SDRs. That drives the business goals, but also increases camaraderie. And then sprinkle in some fun. Like we have a competition that runs every week on my team. That's a word of the week. Whoever can say the word or the phrase in a meeting, in the most meetings, gets to pick the next word or phrase for next week. Right. You know, sometimes I try to force like a business goal there where I talk about like book a meeting from a meeting. You know, BAM fam is a term that comes up, right? That's been one of mine, you know, but other times like, you know, it could be ridiculous things like Ramrod was one that somebody on my team picked, right? Not totally relevant to anything, but it was fun and it's engaging and it's a good time.
Yeah, 100%. I used to do word bingo, cold calling bingo, right? As you're on the phone calling, you go through a bingo sheet. You could do a couple of rounds during the day and you get people out of their comfort zone. And I would use it in onboarding to really get people invested in making the calls, right? That reluctance of, oh God, I don't want to make a call. Okay, well, make a call and ask about this weather or try to do this, right? And then make it a lot more fun to get them to overcome just focused on the one element of, hey, I got to book a meeting. It's like, no, there's another goal in mind. Try to bring up the weather, make a funny joke, you know, use Ramrod in a sentence, right? Like the bingo idea is probably my favorite.
Definitely stealing that. Yeah.
Oh, it's the best because people hate cold calling, right? Like they hate it. Like I've been doing it for a long time and I'm a subject matter expert, but I don't like it. But SDR bingo is a game changer, especially in your onboarding and getting people over those first few calls and getting in that practice. And then your vets that are just kind of bored. They've been doing it for a year. So that's a great option. I will end here. As we are wrapping up here, hope this session was powerful for you. Gamification can be done really well. And everyone, it's not about money. It's not about competing. There's a way to do it healthy. Please, I dropped a link in the link to schedule a demo with SalesScreen. Take a look at it. Just to give you an idea, we implemented it at the beginning of the year within RevLeague, and our group had a 78% month-over-month increase from December to January upon rollout. And we just did it again this month with a 200% increase almost. So the gamification element is a game changer when you can hit those 5 pillars we touched on, right? The coaching, the leaderboards, the achievements, and those rewards. But here are our Slack handles. You can catch us on the RevGenius Slack, catch us on LinkedIn. I dropped those in the chat as well. Any final thoughts, James or Matt? I will kick off to you, Matt, first. Any final thoughts?
Important to think about. The foundation is about motivation. That is what drives people to unlock potential that they never realized they could have. And if you as a leader can tap into that, it's incredible what you can accomplish together.
For me, at least, I think the biggest thing is you should know what your company records are. And if you don't, then start celebrating them every single time. The small things, the big things, the massive things. Make sure that you have that. So important. And this has been great.
Awesome. We will be getting everybody a recording. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We're happy to jam with you all on some ways that you could pull some levers internally. But again, find things that your SDR or AE team is motivated by, as well as what you're trying to get adoption with, whether that's a tool, a task, again, getting those AEs to drop those notes, anything that you can. Gamification will be that lever to change. But thank you all for coming by, and have a great rest of your day and a great week. We'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye.